And today we'll be talking about something deeply personal to me. My top 5 gods. And as such, this will obviously be purely my personal preference. And I'm gonna preface this by saying, drop your comments down below and tell me what your favorite gods are after the video, so that instead of being upset about my favorite gods, you can just talk about yours instead. And obviously, I'm not just gonna talk about what my favorite gods are, but also what makes them my favorite gods, why I like them so much that they made my top 5. First, 3 honorable mentions that would almost have made the top 5, but don't quite make it. The first one here is Kali. Kali, I think, is a great character that is a lot of fun because I really love basic attack characters, and you will see that reflected in my top 5 as well. But as there are so many other basic attack characters in my top 5 already that I prefer over Kali in most situations, she doesn't quite make the cut. I feel like Kali, more than any other basic attack god, is just super pub stompy, and you either get your snowball going or it's not going anywhere. She's also very frustrating to play against certain characters, like for example Kumbhakana, and that just makes her not always the ideal choice, or makes her a bit less of an all-rounder depending on the enemy CC, and that just doesn't sit too well with me despite her being super fun to play. Ao Kuang is in a similar boat, also a basic attack focused assassin style character, even though a mage in this case, though he is a little bit more bursty with a build that is typically more focused on single ability burst with a 3 or one-shot combo basically than the basic attack focused builds. I like playing with both kinds of builds, also with the ring builds, and I think that is part of what makes him very fun. I most enjoyed Ao Kuang when he was still a lot stronger in regards to his basic attack focus, as well as in the Dirty Bubble meta where you could actually go tank Ao Kuang. But I still think he's a very fun character overall, just not quite as fun as others for me. And the third one here is Habwa. I just absolutely love bursting people down with Habwa. It is always fun to have these super high damage numbers popping up very quickly, but at the same time, the frustration when playing against the Habwa can get pretty high. So that's one downside, and also depending on how you're playing and in what situation you're in, if the enemy team is very coordinated and focuses you down throughout the early stages of the game, then Habwa becomes significantly less fun. And that brings us to the actual top 5. Number 5 for me is Morrigan. Now Morrigan, I think, is a great character in terms of her design. I think that both visually and in terms of the concept, in terms of the abilities and everything, she flows very well together, she feels really fun. The delay on her 1 is something that I am now used to more, and I understand why it's there, and I really think that her kit overall is very cool. The big downside with Morrigan, why she would not make top 1 for me as well, is the fact that her ult still comes with a few glitches here, then and there, and that can just be very frustrating in some situations. Also, what I find a little bit unfortunate about the Morrigan is that more often than not, the most rewarding path to go with her in terms of her ultimate, in terms of transformation, is going for the highest damage dealer, go for an assassin, sometimes a hunter, but that's just what it's going to be in most cases. And there are very few scenarios where it's rewarding to go into a secondary tank or, I don't know, anything that is not directly bursty. So you can sometimes do like things like transform into a hunter for an objective as well, but overall I wish there was more playing around with the ultimate, more situational strategies that could be applied more effectively more often, when it turns out that's not quite as often the case as you would think it is. Obviously a better Morrigan player will find moments to do that, but that's just not me. And in the same sense, I find that Morrigan feels a lot more team dependent than many other gods. I know that is not the case for everyone. I know that some people can very reliably carry on her in ranked in solo queue that we have now, but that's just not the case for me either. I feel like Morrigan feels best in a team environment, and that's not always given. Number 4 for me is a god that is a little bit different in terms of skill level for Morrigan for sure, and that is Bakasura. Bakasura is just the god that I've always had a thing for, basically. I've always had him in the back of my mind at least, because he is one of the first gods that I played very extensively. He is the god that I played in Season 1 to get the ranked frame in Duel back in the day, when I was still actively playing Duel, or the only time I was really actively playing Duel. And he is still very enjoyable to me personally. For a long time I thought he was just somewhat underwhelming because the situation he was in the meta really wasn't very favorable, and I was still somewhat used to the very early stages where Bakasura was actually very dominant in Conquest, where you could play Hog and kill 3 minions with that and then basically get lane pressure immediately with him in solo, and that is just something that never really came back. I really wish it did, because it gave solo a completely different feeling, and I enjoyed playing solo a lot more back in those days when it was this quick, clear aggression plays, but that's just not a thing anymore. And for a long time in between, Bakasura just didn't feel quite as great. He didn't feel as good in jungle because he didn't really have the clear, and there was just many weak spots that he had overall. Now with his new buffs, I think he feels a lot more enjoyable again. He may actually be a bit too enjoyable at this point for many players. We're seeing a lot of stats for him really ramping up, and now we also have Berserker Shield, which might help him even more. So we'll have to see what happens to him in the next month if his ranked stats stay up like that. But that's another topic in itself, and I think Bakasura is very fun either way. Number 3 for me is, triggered comment section incoming, Awildish. I think Awildish is one of the most gods in Smite and has always been and will always be. A lot of that is down to the fact that she is a hybrid character who works very well with basic attacks, but then also with abilities, and has a split damage between the two. I kinda wish she would work a little bit more effectively as a basic attacker still. She used to be extremely good with Executioner as well, and then Executioner got nerfed a lot, so that's not quite the case anymore. But overall, she is still a very potent god in any sense, more than ever with her new buff as well. And I think another part of Awildish that is super fun is her ultimate. It just feels so rewarding to knock people up and pull them to you, or have them jump back and pull them in the right moment. If you can time that right, it just feels great every single time, and the audios that come with it make it even more satisfying. And then we are down to number 2. Number 2 for me is Hun Batz. Hun Batz is a character that I originally didn't like very much, but that has very much grown on me over time. I would say that once Nemesis took this slot, but Nemesis just doesn't feel as fun anymore. And even though Hun Batz is a not so complex character as well, much like Nemesis, I think especially with his 3 there is more interesting stuff that you can do, just teleport at the right moment to an enemy that doesn't expect it. Then there's also this great disruption with the ultimate that sometimes you just have in a 1v1, and sometimes you can set a whole team fight apart with it. And that is, I think, a big thing for him as well. It feels very satisfying to have an assassin that can do a lot of single target damage and has certain ways to make sure he gets some of that damage off at least, but also is able to have an impact on late game teamfights, not just on a singular scale like most assassins, but on a team-wide scale with that massive disruption. I also always liked his interactions with Hydra's Lament, etc., though those may not be quite the same as they used to be anymore now with certain changes to his passive and to the interactions between those things. Another thing about Hun Batz that I especially like is how entertaining his voice pack is, and how he overall is such a funny character as well, looking at all the emotes he has, the special emotes and stuff like that. And on the note of special emotes and stuff like that, we are coming to the number 1 for me personally. My favorite god in Smite for a little while now. And that is Vamana, or Vaman if you pronounce it properly. Vamana is a god that I always liked, and I always thought he was rather fun, and obviously he fits in with the theme of basic attack focused gods, or hybrid characters especially, as he is in the early stages of the game rather ability focused, and the longer the game goes, the more he shifts into this basic attack focused character with his ultimate especially, but keeps the flexibility to do both. But what really sold me on him wasn't only his playstyle. I recently started playing with his Serenity skin, and that is actually what got me even more into the character. Basically, all VGS commands on the skin are very Zenyatta, Overwatch-like, very calm, very talking about tranquility and whatnot, and that is just so cool to me. Like, if I feel a little bit tilted from the game, then playing Vamana is what can bring me back and actually makes me use my VGS for comms in general more, because it's just so much fun to use it as well. Along with that, you have a character that in itself is very fun to play. Not only does he work super well with a lot of movement speed, meaning he can run around across the map really fast, which feels nice, because all the items that have movement speed as well in the Katana tree works so well for him, but he also can be a somewhat of a Kali, really. Just that he is CC immune for the whole duration, and he works a little bit differently in that he can still die, but he's more sustain focused. Obviously, with a lot of anti-heal, that can work out not as well for him, but overall I think he feels very, very fun in that regard if you're playing in this carry kind of style, and I love him in the jungle currently. Obviously, the fact that he is more of a niche pick kind of contributes to that. It's just something a little more unexpected that many people don't know how to deal with, and that's why I really enjoy it. And those are my top 5 gods plus some honorable mentions. Again, let me know in the comments down below what your top 5 gods are and why, how you feel about them, why they've become your top 5 gods, similar to Bakasura for me, that has a little bit of history, and yeah, how you generally feel about them. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting, entertaining to watch, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.